Fantasy Fest rolls on. Thank you to Joey P. Joey P getting out of here. Everyone's like, oh no, Joey's gone. Joey did awesome. I'm taking over here for a tiny bit for the hosting duties. And I got these two fine gentlemen. Joe Orrico is back in the house as we're talking about breakout pitchers. And the one, the only, look at that hair, Lance Brozdowski, my boy Lance Bros on the Twitter, over on Marquee, and really anywhere. I think you were just out here calling a spring training game in my neck of the woods. Mr. Brozdowski, what's up, brother? Oh, I think you're muted. There we go.
Unmute. There we go. My bad. What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's so good to have you. We're talking breakout pitchers on this bad boy. A lot to get through, Lance. Just got to, give you your tea here that you've been absolutely killing it. Orrico and I, we've been doing some shows together, obviously, here on Fantasy Pros, and we have cited you a bunch. Your channel has been fantastic. Your breakdowns have been fantastic. If people haven't checked it out, make sure you go and check it out on YouTube. Lance Brozdowski, just type that in. You'll find his channel, and it's just some really incredible things from top to bottom to new pitching changes. We're going to be talking about some of those breakout pitchers. I do got to ask you, and sorry, we're burying Orrico here for just a minute. Dying to get your take before we jump into it on Rōki Sasaki for a second, because you did. I think that was probably, I don't want to speak for you, but one of the things that kind of launched this offseason for you was some of your coverage that other people didn't have on Rōki Sasaki. And now we've seen him. We've seen these two different versions of this splitter, like a gyro crazy splitter. Just a quick take on Rōki Sasaki and your breakdowns.
Yeah, the fastball's not good. I think people are realizing that. That was something I kind of highlighted when I was looking at the MPB data, which I did hit on in my channel. That got some nice views and stuff. It does seem like people don't have a ton of knowledge and info as to what's going on over there. And it's a little bit hard because they're using a different baseball. So you kind of have to project the change that will occur for a given player. The splitter is insane, though. I mean, I've talked to some other people in other organizations actually about him, and I think a lot of people see him long-term as a reliever, but given the value the Dodgers have him at, it's really, they're just going to push him as a starting pitcher. I imagine we see some tweaks pretty quick there, though. Last year with Yamamoto, they gave him a month, and then they added a sinker and a slider. He's got to tweak the slider. He's probably going to add some kind of sinker. There's got to be more there. It's just he's a low spin capacity guy, so you don't have as much clay to mold. So, I mean, I don't know if we're going to get into it on this. I don't think we are, actually. I think I gave you my sleepers ahead of time. But yeah. I'm not really ending up with Sasaki anywhere as price.
Oh, Mr. Joe Orrico, we've done some shows together, and I have been pretty vocal about not being into Rōki Sasaki. And I'll be honest with you, one of the things definitely was Lance's early video about the slider not in play, because it took me back to my just old takes I had on like Casey Mize, where everyone was like, oh my God, the splitter, and the fastball is okay. But it's like, all right, but if you're not throwing the splitter, getting the whiffs on it, then people are just sitting on your fastball and destroying it. And, things will be readjusted, but there's no splitter there. Joe, are you a Rōki Sasaki guy? His ADP is like right at, I think it's like 104. I just did a show on this. He's SP 30 on the consensus ADP on Fantasy Pros. Are you a Rōki guy, Joe?
Not really. I got a couple shares earlier in draft season, like right when he got posted, where the price was still relatively reasonable. And then right when he got posted, I think he went in the third round a few different times. Now he's not going there right now. But even still inside of the top 100 where he generally is going, I just think there's a lot of risk. Once he signed, or maybe it was right before he signed, he talked about how he was recommended Tommy John surgery last year. I've seen some of these charts where the fastball doesn't look great. Lance is obviously going to be a lot better at breaking those down, but there's a lot of risk. There's the injury risk. There's the Dodgers, who just can't seem to keep anybody healthy. They also have a ton of arms, so they could potentially go with a six-man rotation. There's a lot of ways for Rōki to not return value at his current ADP for sure.
Not good fastballs, not a good slider, and maybe the greatest splitter we've ever seen in two different variations. We'll see where it goes. It's some big questions. But we are going to be talking, maybe, whether he's a breakout or not. We are going to be talking about breakout pitchers. Both of these fine gentlemen have given us a couple names you guys are going to really like. I do want to point out throughout this, we will try to answer some questions at the end. We'll be looking through here. If you have to have your question answered, remember, we have super chats enabled. You can drop it up there. We will make sure to get to it in this segment, and plus we got another hour and some holdover after, so pretty much your super chats are going to be guaranteed. But if you want to make sure it's there, get in on that lock that down. Let's get into it. Lance, let's start with your first breakout pitcher. And let's go. It's kind of a twofer. I actually don't even know what we have on the graphics here before we see it. We've got Max Meyer on the list here, but also you're going to be throwing in some Ryan Weathers, because I know he has been a big topic of conversation and really showed some big signs last year. But give us both of maybe what people didn't expect, 2 Marlins breakout starting pitchers.
Yeah, this is my staff. So I do think we're so good with stuff models and everything on the public side that when I often look at, I tend to delay my looking at ADP. I honestly probably looked at it for the first time maybe a week ago. I don't do much offseason drafting. So when I looked at it, a lot of the time I'm like, dang, everyone's in on that guy. And it's not particularly surprising because of how ubiquitous stuff models and all these other things are. What I tend to go for on the edge side is things that are not caught, I don't think, at least in projections. And one of the big things here is the Marlins turned over a bunch of pitching staff, just completely wiped the floor with pretty much everybody they had. They brought in a new director of pitching, new pitching coach, new assistant pitching coach, and a variety of other people. They doubled their analytics staff. And I think the gains from that are going to be seen quickest at the major league level. And to me, that means all of these guys are in play for me. Edward Cabrera, Max Meyer, Ryan Weathers, Sandy Alcantara, I like him a lot. We'll see where the innings go on him. Yuri Perez, again, those guys are tougher to draft. So I'm going with the guys that I think are in the rotation off the bat. Max Meyer is one of them. Pretty obvious last year he shouldn't have been throwing the fastball as much as he did. We saw this small sample we did get of him in spring. He's throwing a better sinker. He added a sweeper. It's a nasty pitch. He's got a really good feel for spin. I think that slider, the OG pitch at Minnesota, that was just an absolute banger. Just even in the draft and everything, everyone thought that was at least like a 70 grade pitch. That's still a great offering, but now you have everything on top of it that will allow him to succeed. It's a big ballpark. If you're trying to scout wins here, you're not going to get them. That team is projected really low. But I have a bold take video probably coming out next week, and I can tease one of the bold takes there, is that I think the Marlins starting pitchers specifically will have like a top 5 ERA in baseball. I'm all in on the infrastructure change there and it not being caught properly in projections.
With Ryan Weathers, just to throw him in here, both these guys have like a similar 300 plus ADP. He's obviously been popping. And so you can keep Max Meyer up here because we're talking about both these guys just for people to look at. But like, where is your preference run between Max Meyer and Ryan Weathers as far as investment? If you could only have one for this season, which of those breakout Marlins pitchers are you locking into?
Probably Weathers, just because you have a little bit more of a track record. We've seen it, right? With Meyer, we have not seen it almost at all. So you're betting on a lot more of like a change in a variety of directions. And I think stuff models just like Ryan Weathers better, particularly from a fastball standpoint. So on those 2 pillars, I'd probably lean Weathers. But yeah, I mean, the fastball improvement for Weathers looks really good. I think he tweaked his changeup as well. He's going to be throwing a shorter slider a lot more. I'm all in on this staff being able to kind of bump all these guys up, particularly on the rate stats specifically, like ERA, whip, strikeouts. I think they're all going to go over. If all these guys only win 8 games, just make sure you front load your staff with guys that are projected a little bit more strongly on the win side, which is what I probably plan on doing if I'm targeting some of these guys, 2 or 3 of them late to add to my bench and have as early kind of breakout starting pitchers that I could eventually slot into my lineup.
Orrico, Meyer or Weathers, either one of those targets. I feel like Weathers is he's kind of a hot commodity right now. Yeah. There's a pillar of hot commodities. Gavin Williams has become one of the biggest one. Chris Sanchez is probably like the top, and then it's Gavin Williams, and then the lower of the commodities has been Ryan Weathers. Orrico, either one of Meyer or Weathers in your potential last round pick arsenal?
Yeah, I have a good few shares of Max Meyer. I did a few of those 50-round draft and holds, and he was earlier in draft season. I think I looked at it a couple days ago. It was like a 35th round pick in a 15-team league. That's not the price anymore for sure. So you are going to have to adjust to the market, but I think it's reasonable. Last year, I just wonder if the Marlins may have gotten in his head a little bit. He had a few good starts. He got sent down. Then when he came back, and he actually struggled when he was sent down, and he struggled when he came back up. So I wonder if they may have gotten in his head a little bit, but I think the things that Lance points out about the entire organization essentially changing over in terms of the pitchers, the pitching coaches, is a huge factor that doesn't get captured. Nobody really talks about that kind of thing, which is why we bring somebody like Lance on for this kind of show, because you're going to highlight things like that we don't really look at. And I think that's a really key point. People are going to be caught up in the projections, and they're not great. And the barrel rate last year was bad, but I think Max Meyer is the preferred target for me. I like them both, but I'm a little bit more invested personally in Max Meyer this year.
Lance, can I ask you one last quick, just to make this like a quick answer, but one more Marlins thing. I did a video just recently that I think one of the greatest ADP values, and I know people are more common to be like, I'm going to pick someone in the 300s. I said Sandy Alcantara was one of the best values because he's almost going outside the top 150. Obviously, that's creeping a tiny bit. There's back and forth about whatever type of limitations that could be out there. But between, him hitting almost triple digits, averaging high 90s, theoretical no limitations, and clearly being traded, I think there's so much that's working in his favor. What do you think the odds on, or when he gets traded, what does that boost to his value? And when he's like outside the top, 30 SPs, do you think he deserves to be higher, baking in that like when he gets traded ability? Or do you think, some of the stuff that he doesn't get the whiffs sometimes and has to go deeper into games and the value of the Marlins kind of brings it down? What do you think that value looks like if with him being moved for Sandy Alcantara?
Yeah, I plan on probably having a good amount of him. I think the angle I would look at is like, okay, if he is slow rolled in the Garrett Crochet where he's throwing 4 or 5 innings for a month, I often think that is when your staff as a fantasy owner is the healthiest, such that I can probably backfill and be somewhat confident and not having to roll out some like midseason starter that I've never seen, that got jumped up from AA that maybe looks fun. So I don't mind that like early, there won't be that much innings in a worst case scenario. There's also a chance he throws against Skeens, I believe it is on an opening day, and goes 7 or 8. And he was correct when he said in his scrum the other day that, there are no limitations. He hasn't been talked to about limitations or anything. So that is a variable there that I think is suppressing his overall cost that I'm happy to scoop up, because if they let him loose, like I see no reason why he isn't the Sandy of past.
I think great thing. Our Fantasy Pros MLB channel in the YouTube said, where do we think Alcantara ends up? Love to hear it in the chat. Where do you think he ends up? I think a lot of people we talked about it a little bit earlier with the CBS guys, but Yankees, I think you obviously could look at the Mets as another option. So let's hear it in the chat. Where do you think Sandy Alcantara ends up? Joe Orrico, you have a breakout pitcher, and oh boy, I'm glad you're doing it, so I don't have to do it. Said pitcher is Brandon Pfaadt. I hate to ever have to talk about him because then everybody gets on my case. A year too early, maybe. Expected ERA quite a bit lower. That sweeper getting stuff going with the sinker. I think Brandon Pfaadt is just still such a great value. The expected ERA tells us a lot, but why don't you tell us why Brandon Pfaadt is your breakout pitcher?
Yeah, I've been very interested in him. Eno threw a little bit of cold water when we did a show together a couple of weeks ago about his ability to get left-handers out, which is something that I need to consider. But when you look at his track record in the minor leagues, I believe it was 2022, he led all the minor leagues in strikeouts. It's been a little bit of a rocky road, but he threw 181 innings last year, which is massive in terms of projecting the volume. The 4.71 ERA is not going to impress anybody, but like you mentioned, all of the ERA estimators were about a run lower, 3.58 expected FIP. I really like to look at Sierra. I think Sierra is probably the best of the ERA estimators, and that was at 3.65. His stuff is very good. It comes out above average. Specifically, the slider is excellent, and it's a very good team. The Diamondbacks scored more runs than anybody else in Major League Baseball last year, so I think with the innings, you can also project probably 12 to 13 wins out of him. Overall, I think Brandon Pfaadt is a really, really nice pick. Now, there are some people who will push him up in drafts, but generally speaking, about pick 180 to 200 in most rooms, and I can definitely get behind him in that range.
And he's locked into significant amount of innings, and like I have obviously a tenuous relationship as being like a Brandon Pfaadt guy for a long time, but really poor into the season. He had a 3.97 first half ERA, 5.93 second half ERA. And his problem, twofold, has been going deep into the season and deep into games too. He got absolutely blown up 5th inning on, and you have to be able to get to the 5th inning. So, when you talk about left-handers, you'd love for him to develop some type of changeup, just to keep that off a little bit, to be able to get into that sweeper more. And like you said, be able to control those left-handers. But there's definitely good strikeout potential with Brandon Pfaadt. Lance, do you have any takes on Brandon Pfaadt? Obviously from a fantasy perspective, but from a growth perspective this year, do you think he can overcome, which was fine, 24% K percentage, 5% walk rate, a run lower estimator as far as ERA? Do you think he can kind of come to a little bit more with what some expectations are?
Yeah, he's odd. I like him overall. I think he's a guy that I plug in as more of like a horse. Like I'm confident in taking the over on his 2025 projection you have on screen right there. Like I think he's going to go 170 plus. But he's got lefty problems overall. Like he ran into these a ton last year, and it's a byproduct of the fact that he doesn't really have the best four seam shape. Sinkers, opposite handedness, really relies on location. Sweeper, even though his has like this lift component that generally works, and becomes a little more platoon neutral. The changeup was the pitch in the minors that was really good for him. And when he came up in a couple years ago or whatever it was, that first year wasn't great, and it's like slowly improved. But I still wonder whether there's like a better grip there or something he could go to. I think Savant has it tracked that he threw 2 splitters, or he had a day or a game, I think it was in Washington, where he threw a bunch of splitters. And I was like, what is that? And I was like, just throw that. Like, that's better than your changeup, you know? I'm not entirely sure if he's going to solve the lefty problems, but he's a guy that I'm like waiting to see some kind of location or shape change on, whether it's I move my fastball here, or like I'm going to throw like this bullet slider to try to help a little bit with down and swing miss as opposed to the sweeper. There's like ways for him to get to it. I haven't seen it yet. So I'm hoping that like early in April, it's like, oh yeah, here we go. Here's a nice little, you know, the changeup looks different and he moves his fastball around a little more. And it's like, okay, I could get a little confident in him regressing back to the average versus lefties.
Well, also everybody talking about the kick change. Like, I don't know, maybe experiment with that. Like, let's see it. Let's see it. Other guys are doing it. It is the pitch du jour for this season, from split fingers last year to sweepers the year before. It's kick changes, and any type of growth like that could be a really big difference between him being a workhorse and maybe being a lot more viable in fantasy. We've got another breakout pitcher coming up here for Lance in just a second, but we've talked about some amazing players in here that might provide some amazing bets. So friends, go over to Betting Pros on the app today. You can download the free Betting Pros app for iOS or Android ahead of the baseball season. And with Sportsbook Sync, automatically track your bets across all major sports books in one spot. You can go and check out, you can see right now under mine, I have got a couple of the bets that I talked about very early in the show, like Garrett Crochet to lead the league in strikeouts at, I think I got 8.5 to 1. Some places that's at 9. You can track them and make your bets there. Easily monitor your bet performance by sport and bet type, including game, picks, props, and parlays. You can create custom betting systems to find winning trends and profitable opportunities. And you can get a free trial of Betting Pros Premium by downloading the app at bettingpros.com/app and activating your trial on the upgrade screen. Go and do that today. We see we're going to hit this in just a second. We've got a super chat, which we're hitting super chats. Also want to remind everybody that we have that giveaway going on, autographed Chris Sale jersey. All you got to do is comment, make sure you're subscribed and comment. And I believe we're going to be announcing the winner, I think, during this broadcast. Sorry, I threw this up on Sal here, but subscribe to Fantasy Pros MLB YouTube channel, comment on this stream, and that is it. That is not a breakout pitcher. That is a guy that broke out on the Cy Young side. You can win this signed jersey courtesy of us and courtesy of my friend Dennis Sidler at Sid's Graphs. You can go to Sid's Graphs and check out. He's got some amazing Chris Sale stuff and more. That one courtesy of Sid's Graphs. All right, boys, let's get to this next one, and then we're going to get to the super chat that's on screen. Lance, your breakout pitcher number 2 is a guy that we have talked about, Gavin Williams. So break this bad boy down, because he is one of the pitchers du jour. Why and how excited should we be about Gavin Williams in fantasy this year?
Yeah, this seems to like be a pretty popular pick, which I'm kind of bummed about. I saw it was on Eno's recent breakout pitchers post as well, and I was like, yeah, you beat me to it. But yeah, this is an easy one. Like a lot of the times we'll see adjustments in spring and we'll see good results, and I sometimes those are whatever, but when you can actually tie them back to some reporting that I saw from MLB.com that said he's tweaked his mechanics, trying to stay taller over his back leg. And what we see there is that the four seam's picked up a little bit of carry. So it's got a little more of that rise and hop. Same velocity. His release height's changed. I imagine when we get arm angle data in season, that'll be up a bit. I think it just makes the fastball slightly more unique, even if Stuff Plus overall is still probably going to believe that the trade-off between his prior year fastball and this fastball is pretty even. He also tweaked his slider, trying to turn it into more of like a true sweeper. On Savant, it says he was throwing a slider and a cutter last year. I'm pretty confident that was just one pitch. For some reason, it was being tracked differently. It's one of these oddities that I always pick up on that I don't think anybody cares about, but I love finding that stuff. So anyways, I think it's one slider. And I also think going forward, which I don't think I've heard anybody mention, is like, I think there's room to add back some kind of cutter. And I love the concept that we'll maybe get down the road more of these efficient fastball guys adding sinkers too. So I think he's good as is with these changes. And then I also think you could see some tweaks in season. We saw Tanner Bybee add a sinker late last year. He also added like a second slider off the sweeper. So the Guardians are great at pitching development. You know, the concern here is just the injury side. This guy's been hurt for the majority of his career. Like even in the minor leagues and stuff, he was always running into injuries. So the thing I like going for on the breakout side is more like on a per inning basis, I think he will break out. So even if he ILs for some reason at some point in the year, if he could get to like 120, 130 innings, I think he'll break out based on the inning pitch total alone. And then if he's on my fantasy squad, I hopefully can be able to backfill and have some pitching depth.
And that's kind of the thing I talked about with Garrett Crochet. And when you look at a lot of projections too, like he's way up there, but the innings are projected low. If you can beat the projected innings, you have the potential to be a top 3 or 4 overall fantasy starting pitcher this year. Gavin Williams is in there. And, and I would throw this out as well, Lance, which is interesting is, you were kind of like, dang, some people are already talking about it.
Yeah.
But it's like, in the grand scope of it, if you look at ECR and FantasyPros, where rankers go, he's still SP 73. So I mean, there's a lot of improvement there. I talked about Chris Sanchez as kind of a sleeper. He's not really a sleeper because everybody in the community kind of knows about him. But if you're talking about investment in what your return can be, there's that. The same thing is kind of happening. Gavin Williams hasn't had that breakout. As far as these projections go, real quick, if you're looking at ERA, let's do ERA in innings, over, under. I guess, just go under the ERA, over the ERA, and then over the innings or under the innings.
I think he's like a mid-3s guy. I think he's like a 3.5 to 3.7 if I had to project him. And the innings, I wish I could push. I'll probably take like 135, so I guess I'll go over. But, if he gets to like a 170, like that's amazing. That is a breakout. But my bet more is that I could get him on a per inning basis better than his cost, such that I only get him to allocate like 130 if on my squad to a guy like him.
That makes him probably like Joey, like SP around 50. I mean, I think there's like SP 50 to 40 upside of Orrico. I don't know. Are you in the Gavin Williams streets?
I'm going to preface my comments by saying Lance knows a lot more about pitching than I do, and he's a lot smarter than I am, but I'm not interested just based on the injury risk. I think people are going to push him up. People are going to push him up a lot in draft season because people like Lance and Eno and a lot of smart pitching, the smartest people are highlighting him, and he's being shared around on social media a lot. I just worry about the elbow holding up. He missed half of last season with the elbow soreness, which I believe was inflammation. There's all kinds of different things that can happen, but I believe it was inflammation of the elbow. The performance once he came back was leaving something to be desired. Can he stay healthy for a whole season? Is kind of my main concern. I don't doubt that the Guardians are fantastic with pitching development. They've proven that they are. It's just a matter of if he's going to be able to stay on the field enough. And I don't know. That's really the only concern for me.
Yeah, my only pushback sometimes on stuff like that is it's similar to the Jackson Holiday stuff where it's like we break down and earlier with the Bubba and Bloom segment where you look at some of these guys, you're like, okay, there's risk. It's like outside the top 150 when you start to get to that, it's like the risk. Yeah. It's so much less. I don't care so much. Even Gavin Williams, absolute highest singular rank is 156 overall. I don't know what SP that ends up being. But the risk is still relatively low. And you get outside the top 200s, it's almost non-existent for potential upsides. That's why it's like I wouldn't really refute. Let's go to the super chat in here. Michael Jensen dropped a super chat. Sal, if you're able to bring that up. Rhett, Lowder, and Carlos Estevez, if covering RPs. Oh, just me. Lance, just a quick thought. Rhett, Lowder, Carlos Estevez. Are you in on Lowder as a starter? And do you have any take on the closer situation between Urseg and Estevez?
Lowder, I'd have to check the injury stuff there. Isn't he down? He hasn't thrown, right?
I don't think he's thrown in a game yet. No.
So then I don't know. Like that's tough to take a guy you don't. I just want injury updates there. So I would literally go over to somewhere and just check where his injury status is and what he's projected. Estevez is a weird one because they paid for him, but Urseg is the better pitcher there in the bullpen, right? So you run into a weird spot. Like, how are they going to use him? My assumption is that like early in the year, Estevez is the guy that is used. And then maybe Urseg takes it on skill alone. But I'd be surprised if, like, out of the gate, Estevez is not getting all the saves. He is somewhat of a slow starter, though. I remember last year with the Angels, I believe it was, his velo was, like, way down in spring, and people were, like, fading him. And I actually had intel from that at work at the time that, like, he just was really slow on his ramp-up, and they knew this, and everyone knows this, apparently. He just gets in slow. I don't know if that changed. But if he's, like, not looking good in spring or anything, I'm leaning Estevez to answer the question. But, yeah, that's a tough one. Lowder, I don't know where he is on the injury side. I like him as a pitcher. I think he's like a kind of a funky command guy, bit of a throwback to like the old days of locating stuff's fine, but that park is tough. So give me Estevez here.
Yeah, he's not like Kirby. He's not throwing like high 90s. It's like lower 90s with command and stuff. Rico, real quick, do you have a take Estevez versus Urseg for the closer role in Kansas City? Is there one you want to invest in?
I kind of like investing in both of them. The thing with Estevez is he is only going to be making his spring debut on Friday. He was held up with some back tightness. Don't know how much to read into
Always
that.
slow to start.
Yeah. So there's that concern. I also think Urseg is just a much better pitcher, but when you're talking about, potentially going to arbitration, how many saves a guy has does play into it. Kansas City's probably going to give the job to Carlos Estevez at the start of the year, which is why I don't mind taking him late. There's been some mock drafts we've done where I've taken him in the 230s, 240s. Even if I get 10 saves out of him over the first 2 months of the season or something like that, that is still valuable. But I do think that the talent with Urseg will eventually win out. This is a team that is in a very winnable division. They're an up-and-coming team. I don't see them going with an inferior arm just to save a few dollars in arbitration. I could be wrong there, but I think over the course of the season, Urseg will return a higher fantasy profit.
Let's go to your last one, Orrico. We got one more breakout pitcher, and you picked the Tylor of Megills, because there's a couple Megills out there. Talk to us about Tylor Megill and why he is your one of two choices for breakout pitcher.
I've never been able to quit Tylor Megill. I do have a bit of a blind spot with him. I've always loved him going back to when he was a rookie. And last season, I think he actually made some serious strides. His strikeout rate went up to 27%. The command was still a little bit shaky, but a 9.5% walk rate is not terrible, especially with that many strikeouts. It was the best version of him we've ever seen before. So far in spring, I also like what we've seen so far. It's only 6 2/3 innings, but he's looked very good, and the Mets desperately need him. He's only pitched a maximum of 126 innings. That was in 2023. They don't really have room to fool around here. Trevor Megill should be making 25 starts with this team, and I think based on what we saw last year, we can expect a much improved version of him. The stuff improved across the board. He has 5 offerings that grade out as at least average. I really like him potentially pitching for one of the better teams in the National League as well. Juan Soto already going to a team that won the in the National League Championship Series. So if he's winning 12 or 13 games, giving me a mid-3s ERA at a very low cost, I think that's what we can expect out of Tylor Megill.
Lance, when you're looking at, I'm trying to look up Megill here. Megill is he's practically free. He's in the 500s. Would you rather go Tylor Megill in the 500s or pay that 250 range for Clay Holmes, who is transitioning as a starter? And I loosely try not to do the, he's going to be Michael King comparisons or anything like that, but big whiffs on the slider and stuff. You have to take him. You've got to take him before the end of your draft, is around 250, or you get an absolutely free Tylor Megill. Is that close?
I mean, Holmes looks amazing. I'm definitely going to lean Holmes there, but I still like the Megill pick. Some of the underlying stuff there on how he releases the ball from an extension standpoint are tricky. He's working on a harder curveball this year, which I dig. I think the Mets are kind of on the up and up from a pitching development standpoint, and I think Holmes is a good example of that, of what they've done and how they've overhauled him. To answer that question, I would say Holmes, but I still like Megill. I think Megill's a good pick.
Lance, any other it's one of those things when we have you on too, it's just open up your brain and let us ruminate around and figure out what's going on. Are there any other pitchers that have caught your mind that you want to throw out to us in our last minute here before the end of this segment?
You put me on the spot here.
Sorry, I am absolutely throwing you on the spot.
I'm trying to think. I'll go back to the Marlins. Give me Eric Cabrera. This is the guy that every single year everyone is obsessed with because the stuff is insane. And oh my God, he throws a 94-mile-per-hour changeup, and it's his primary pitch to left-handed hitters and all this stuff. He tweaked his slider from the data we could see in spring, which I don't really know if anyone's talking about, but that's a legitimate change. Similar velocity, but it's got a little more glove side movement to it. I just think that pitch was heavily underutilized for him last year. And if he brings up the usage on that at all this coming season, this is another one of the things that I look at it from the fantasy side, which is okay, how are you projecting him? And now, cool, I'm pretty confident they're going to make this tweak. So, I think I can bump the K rate there. So even if you leave, the walk rate alone for him and assume that he's still not great, if he could get up to, 10.5, 11 K per 9 and, really start to dominate there, I think he's going to be a value. So I'm in on him. A lot of these Marlins guys I'm in on. I just can't – I'm not in a bazillion leagues. So it's one of those things where I'm probably going to get one on each team. I can't go 3 Marlins pitchers on my 3-4 main teams. So it's an awkward spot where I'm championing these guys. But then if you look at my teams, I'm only going to have one of them.
You can if you're a crazy person.
Pitchers, right?
Yeah, if you're a crazy person.
That's a good point.
Get Alcantara and then pick up one of the others.
Yeah.
It'd be some interesting battles in here. Lance Brozdowski, you can find him at Lance Bros. Didn't you just broadcast a game? Were you just in my neck of the woods? Didn't you just get to do a spring training game too, doing the color?
Yeah, it was cool. It was a lot of fun. We were doing that from a studio in Chicago that we're not on site. So I unfortunately didn't get a chance to go to Arizona this year, but that was a fun time. I'm on the last game of the spring too with the Cubs and Braves, which would be fun. So
you're killing it, my friend.
Thanks,
Joe
man.
Rico, killing it. Find Joe Rico at Joe Rico 99. Lance Bros. That is it for me.